Hello and welcome to our program, Your MP, Your Vote, with me, Talusha Vyas. Today we have with us the very determined and delightful Seema Malhotra, Labour Member of Parliament for Feltham and Heston in West London. She was the first batch of Asian female MPs to be elected in Britain's political history and is now hoping to win the seat for a second term. Welcome to our program, Seema, and thanks for agreeing to be interviewed.
Thanks, Talusha. It's great to be joining you.
First of all, how difficult was the battle last time when you were fighting for the seat, which has been seen as a white-collar constituency?
Well, I was very lucky to be selected in the seat where I had grown up as well. I grew up in Feltham and on the other side as well in Osterley, and so this was a place I knew, and somebody who had been active within politics and within the Labour Party for over 20 years, to then have an opportunity to stand in your home area, it was actually just a tremendous privilege and honour. And so I was very lucky. In a sense, politics became more of a family affair because everyone had known my parents as well, had known the shop where we were, knew Heston School where my mother had taught after we left there. So it became very much part of just being in the community. When I stood in the by-election, which was in 2011, it was when my predecessor had died of cancer. So it was a very fast election. I had 2 days to go through the selection to win the ticket. And then we had 18 days for the by-election. And it was a really, really important time because there was quite a challenge going on in Parliament, and people were reading this as to whether or not the Labour Party would have a chance for the next election. So we had to do well, and actually we increased the majority in that by-election. But it was constant, and it was about principles, it was about priorities, it was about being connected in the community, and it was about recognising that politics is there to make a difference. If you get that message across, then I think it helps. The last thing that I think was a very important part of my by-election was that I was the first woman to ever be selected to represent that seat. So when I was going around as the female candidate, there were no other candidates that were women who were standing in the seat either. People really understood that this could be changing something, even just through my election, that for the first time that constituency would have a woman MP. And it really connected not just with women, but with men in the constituency.
So you were an independent management consultant before you moved into politics. So you grew up locally, you were born there, and your past and present careers are somewhat intertwined. Is this what tempted you into politics then?
Well, I think there's a bit of both. I certainly had two parallel careers and for most of my life, and I made a choice when I was at university that I wanted a career outside of politics too, because you do have a lot that you learn that you then bring into your political life. And for me, politics was a passion. I didn't know it would be where I would end up, but it was something that was really just integrated into my life, because everything is political. The decisions we make about how you pay taxes, how you have public services, whether or not you have public transport, what level the fares are, whether healthcare is free. These are all political decisions. And so I believe very much in actually having a voice in that, and not just that I should have a voice, but everybody should have a voice. I believe passionately in the importance of our democracy. And whichever job or career you may choose, these are principles that you can agree become very much part of what you are and what you need to do as a citizen as well. I really was interested in business too, and I'd grown up above a shop. My parents had the shop in Osterley, and like most Asians, and you know, that was our life. And what you realise is that the small shops that we have in our communities are what they make us thrive. They made the community thrive. They gave our communities an identity as well. When your parents, my parents were coming here, that's how they settled. And the legacy of their work is what makes the community so strong. That way that we balanced work and home life as well was so important. That way that we contributed to the wider community. I remember when I first went to secondary school, hardly any Asians were in my class or the year. But then over time that's really grown because the population now is so diverse in Hounslow and many other urban areas. But I think in this I recognised for myself that business was a life I wanted to explore as well. So I worked for the large consultancies, Accenture, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and then became independent. It gave me the flexibility then to both pursue my professional life as well as develop my political career. And in the end, having treated both very equally in my personal life, politics came to the front.
So you are the Labour Party Cooperative MP for Feltham and Heston. What does this term cooperative mean?
Well, the cooperative movement has actually been around longer than the Labour Party. And if you go to other areas, you see it more perhaps in Manchester, you see it now, you see the cooperative supermarket, you can see cooperative funeral care, you can see cooperative financial services, the cooperative bank. And the principle behind that, and it is part of almost like a political or social movement, it's about sharing the ownership together. So it's an alternative sometimes and very complementary to how we have, for example, the NHS, where we collectively fund as citizens and the state delivers those services. With the cooperative movement, people almost buy individual shares in that. So I'm a member of the cooperative movement because I bank with the co-op as well, and I shop at the cooperative supermarket. And that's how you almost build in, it's more of a mutual. Right. So that philosophy, we believe very strongly, also has a role to play in how we structure and deliver services. You can have credit unions that are different ways in which you can lend to people, particularly small amounts in local communities. So people have an interest in the lending as well as the borrowing.
So is this what tempted you to join the Labour Party and no other party?
Well, it's what tempted me to become a Labour and Cooperative MP, because for almost 100 years, or just over 100 years, the Cooperative Party and the Labour Party have had a concordat between them where they don't stand against each other. So I'm a Labour, it's a collaboration. And so what it means is that along with about 30 other MPs, we think slightly differently from the mainstream of the Labour Party. So it's additional to being a Labour Party politician. It's a different way of it's an addition, it's like being two parties, but they are complementary parties.
You, Priti Patel, and a few others of Pakistani and Bangladeshi origins are the first female MPs, Asian female MPs, to be elected in British history, which is quite a proud moment for all Asians in the country. How was that moment for you during the last election? Because you were the first Asian female MP to be elected.
Yeah. So I was, when I was elected in the by-election, I was the first female Punjabi MP to ever be in the House of Commons, and there had been some of my friends and colleagues who had come in 2010, and I think it was just a huge turning point for British politics, because high time, because before that there hadn't been any female Asian MPs at all in the House of Commons. It had been 1987 that the first ethnic minority MP was elected, and that was with Diane Abbott, who is really like a big political sister to me. And so that was, I think, incredibly important for the diversity and representation of our politics. Even now, we have only 27 ethnic minority members of Parliament. If it was representative of the UK, there would be 84. The majority are in the Labour Party and always have been in the Labour Party, partly because of how the Labour Party is embedded in different communities, the work we've done with the Race Relations Act before, the Equalities Act. Our party has generally been more reformist and in different ways, including in having all women shortlist to have women be able to come forward more. Not because they need special treatment, but because the structures have been so set in the ways that politics has been embedded in this country that it takes a long time for that change to come. So it was a hugely proud moment for me. And then to be elected as I was, I think I underestimated the way that would reach, the way it sends a message also that politics is for everybody. You come forward if you believe you have a contribution. I believe everybody has a contribution. Then it's just about finding your place.
So why has it been so difficult for women to get into politics, and that's hampered them all this time, and Asian women for that matter, to get to your level in the political profession? What are the issues that's hampering them?
I think there are different issues that women face, but they are also different issues that Asians and other minorities face, I think firstly, when you are a minority, whether it's in the gender or its ethnicity, you find it harder to then be able to tackle and understand the power structures, the way things work. Sometimes it can be language, but also cultural, exactly. Because sometimes the way decisions are made, the way people network, the way they socialize, the way you influence, the way you build relationships, they are different in different cultures. So I feel very fortunate that I also, when I grew up in Hounslow, and I went to a church school, but then Hounslow was very diverse, it was very open. It gave, through my education as well, it was the free state education, which I think was really important to give us the chance to get on in life. It gave me access to British public life. When I started volunteering in the community, that was a real changing moment for me. When I was a teenager, I used to do a lot of voluntary work with disabled children in Hounslow. I learnt about Britain that way, more than my parents could teach me. And I always strongly advise people, go and learn outside of your cultural boundaries, because you need to understand the wider world. Go and learn outside of your borough. I went across the country with work, but also with the Labour Party. I stood for national roles within the Labour Party and within the Fabian Society. The reason being because I had to learn to push those glass ceilings away from me, because our history didn't give us that. Our history only went back to the 60s in this country. So to understand politics, parliament, the way decisions are made, the way you have impact, needed to have other knowledge. So I always encourage, and I do this as well through the mentoring scheme I've set up through the Fabian Women's Network, where we have many ethnic minorities coming through as well. Go and learn, get mentors in different places, people who don't know you as much as but they know the world you need to know. That's how you keep moving forward. But you have to challenge yourself. And I was also lucky, my parents were very supportive of me moving forward. It really, my father passed away last year as well, and it was a big thing for him as well. He never expected he would come to this country and then his daughter would become a member of parliament. But he believed very strongly that boy or girl, you push forward and you achieve your goals. And so I think that the blessings of your parents go a long way in giving you the courage, to move forward. But women in general
seem to be hampered by the fact that once they get married, they have babies, and then they take time off from work, and then, they just kind of go back into their shell. And this is something that is probably a reason why there are less women in British politics?
I think there is a lot of that, and that's why the mentoring scheme that we set up, we recognise that the barriers and the boundaries in terms of confidence, in terms of knowledge, in terms of just networks about how you get selected, then how you get elected, how you deal with the media, how you campaign. Those things are skills, just as if you were becoming a doctor, you would understand, you need to understand biology, chemistry. So politics also has its disciplines of how you build that portfolio of skills, which requires experience down at the grassroots, which is why getting involved in an election time, you learn so much more. I say this to anybody. You want to understand politics, you want to get involved, decide your party, and go and campaign in the election. This is the time it's concentrated. It's like you learn the most in this bubble because people want help and you can be exposed to so much more in terms of what a politician does. But I think also in terms of women, the barriers, it can be, but you have to feel the fear and then get on and do it. And take the courage to do that. But even shadowing a candidate now, like people come and shadow me during the campaign, go and see what an MP does, go and see what a candidate does. It teaches you. Teaches you a lot. And what we found as well through our research and why we set up our program, people coming in as young people into politics have the same barriers that women coming back after maybe returning from having children, or people who have had experience in other sectors, medicine or business, coming into politics, have the same issues of boundaries because politics has its own culture. So our mentoring scheme recognises that whichever cultural barrier you're crossing, ethnicity or business or the sector, you need the same coaching, you need the same knowledge, and we treat everybody equally. Then what we find is the networks they start to develop themselves take them forward. That's the most important thing. You take your own responsibility, you build your own networks, you set your own direction, and you find people to help you.
So since you've become an MP, the last 5 years, what changes or what have you done in your own constituency of Heston and Feltham? What changes have you made?
There's a whole range of things that we've been focused on. One thing that we really prioritise is making sure that our constituency focus, our engagement was very, very high on my agenda. And that's engaging with all our communities, the Asian community, white community, Nigerian population, Somalian. I believe very strongly when you want to tackle poverty, when you want to build ambition for a space, you need to do that through the people. And you do that through building relationship with the people. So I've been very focused on trying to develop civic leadership as well, programs with young people, being there to develop and network businesses as well. When businesses like our small businesses stay just locally and don't connect with others, they don't get the benefit and then look at how they can grow. So working with local businesses, with the local chambers of commerce, promoting their work, promoting their needs has been, I think, very important in being able to extend and develop the area. I campaigned for, and now we're having a new development plan for Feltham. It's an area that hadn't had the regeneration that it needed. You need to think big sometimes. What are the next stage of the area, and how will then that help with tackling poverty, providing opportunity for young people? I also work very strongly with our faith communities. If you don't work with the networks in the area, then you don't build those relationships. And we've seen when terrorism is on the rise as well, that every community needs to feel secure and have those relationships. So Muslim, Christian, Hindu, Sikh, Buddhist, all of those, multicultural, the interfaith networks, very strong. And then how do we work together to tackle some social issues? So recently in Parliament I had an event on the role of schools, faith communities, community organisations in tackling violence against women and girls, and many came from my constituency as well as across the country for that. But why? Because we can build those networks and we can tackle the social issues too through what we can do together. So there's a lot that we have to do to connect politics with the local community so that jobs, skills, business, opportunities for young people become very, very connected. And I think on that as well, that I believe very strongly in making sure that we can work with the local council. The local council needs to be connected with the community also. How do we tackle those community issues on the ground? If people don't have the confidence that antisocial behaviour is being dealt with or the streets are going to be cleaned, they don't have the confidence to deal with politics on the big issues. So getting the small things right opens the door for the big conversations. That's the change we've been trying to make.
So there are still things that are pending. What sort of issues are you still looking to tackle if you do get elected?
Oh, there's many things we're continuing to tackle because the story's just beginning. I want to see a constituency where I don't have the numbers of young people unemployed that they are. I want to see everybody in employment. We've had a huge rise of 0-hour contracts as well in the constituency, and I've had people coming to me saying to me as well that they don't know what their income's going to be the next week. Young people who on the books, they're employed now, they have a contract, but they wouldn't be able to tell you which day they're going to be working next week. So I had a young boy, a young man, he didn't know if he could even accompany his mum to a hospital appointment, because if he said no, if he phoned up at 8 in the morning and they said, you've got work, then what does he do? So the unpredictability of work is not giving people the security they need.
How are you creating more jobs in your constituency?
So that's where we need to work with increasing the apprenticeships, raising awareness with employers. How do they structure apprenticeships? Working with schools to increase work experience opportunities, so building strong bridges between the schools and the business community. Been supporting various initiatives that the schools have also had in their development as well. So you have to work closely with the education and the business institutions, but also then working to increase entrepreneurship, so helping run workshops about how you also set up your own business. There's there's a range of things you do, but actually also recognising you have to fight in Parliament for some of these changes.
Absolutely.
And that's why I'm really pleased that Labour is going to be tougher on 0 hours contracts, because I see the impact on people's lives. The exploitative nature of them, they are important for flexible working,
students,
but not where sometimes students, sometimes older people, but not where people are then being
bread and butter.
Well, if an employer is going to employ you 12 hours a week, then have a 12-hour-a-week contract. Give that stability. That's the key thing. It's people having that stability of income, then being able to build on that. The other big issue is also about house building. I've been really the levels of people not having access to homes. 10,000 on the waiting list in Hounslow. That's why we need to be building more affordable homes that we've been campaigning for as well. In Hounslow they have, but not enough. But Labour will build 200,000 a year by 2020. There's over 1 million shortfall in the country. But the last thing as well in the NHS, so we've been doing some surveys locally, and I've been shocked by the levels of people waiting for appointments. So particularly GP appointments waiting over a week, A&E appointments, and over 1 million people last year waited more than 4 hours for accident and emergency services.
Absolutely.
So that's the cutbacks and the impact of the reorganisation that there's had. So that's why not just in campaigning now, but through the year, when we do surveys, we find out what's going on, and it very much informs both Parliament work and also what we need to do locally.
Now you have a large Asian population of around 40% in your constituency. What are the concerns of the Asian community and when they come to you?
Well, the NHS has been a big concern. So just this week when I was talking to a group of Asian women as well, just how long they're waiting, 1 week, 2 weeks sometimes for appointments for older people. This has a greater impact as well. Then when you go and you have a test, then you have to book an appointment to go and find out the result. You don't always have that time. You don't have sometimes the transport to go there at the time if you're not feeling well. Then when there's language barrier as well, then so these things are just day-to-day struggles sometimes, but also you want to have that relationship being easier.
So how is Labour going to change all these?
Well, we will definitely be bringing in 20,000 more nurses. We'll be bringing 8,000 more GPs, and those GPs will make sure that there's more capacity in the community for healthcare, but also 5,000 home care workers. So you bridge that gap between the hospital and the community. I think that will make a big difference, because also in our community, as we were talking just very recently, there's more of a culture of looking after your parents when they're older, extended family. So taking on that care responsibility, then to do that you also need support. Carers need support as well. So that's a really important part of how we think about care and the NHS in the future.
But Conservative government is saying they're going to have 7 days a week NHS, which is presumably going to solve problems.
Well, we believe in that, but how will you do that without the funding, and what's behind that? How are you going to do it when, for example, if you took away the maximum, it used to be you had the maximum number of patients per GP, so in any area there were a maximum number, and then you made sure that there were services accessible. The Conservatives took that away. In Hounslow we have one of the highest ratios, so it contributes to the waiting times that we've seen rise. So you have to look at what's behind that. We believe that you should have the time to care in the NHS, and of course you need services over the weekends. People are working much more in the week, and in my constituency shift work is very, very common. So the 5 days a week work isn't the pattern that people see and realise.
Any changes that you've made in your constituency that's specifically geared towards the Asian community in business, economic, political or social issues? What sort of issues have you tackled for the Asian community in particular?
Well, one aspect definitely is working with small businesses, because we have so many small businesses, but raising the profile of the small business community, raising the profile in Westminster and speeches as well, because that's part of celebrating our culture, the diversity of our businesses there. Also just day-to-day issues that people have been campaigning for or needing. So it's been Asians that have led the campaign that we're working on to get direct bus routes from Hounslow West and Cranford up to West Middlesex Hospital. And why is that? Because it's when you need to be able to serve the community, why are people having to stand at the bus stop in the rain, then change buses? And this has been many those who are in the Asian community leading this, but also that day-to-day quality of life when you're in the community, in the majority in the community, tackling street drinking, tackling antisocial behaviour, because you want to be proud of where you're living, just as when we grew up. But also there have been public health issues. In the Asian community we see the rise of diabetes, of heart disease. So running conferences, raising the profile of these issues, also tuberculosis, high levels in the community. So raising awareness through public meetings, through targeting education, through working with the GPs. That's how we have to tackle through prevention.
And there was the ban on mangoes.
And the mango ban, that's true. And this week, actually, we saw just in the last week the first import of Alfonso mangoes again. So this was working again, led by businesses in Western International Market. We campaigned through Parliament to make sure that there was dialogue with the EU, so that the issues that were affecting India's mangoes and the concerns about the fruit flies coming in, you deal with that diplomatically. You deal with that through making sure that you have those measures in place that is being monitored in India's farms. There were different ways other than banning the mangoes that we all love. So I'm really pleased that I think the pressure we put on, and I was very involved in that, meant that we've managed to see that ban is raised much earlier than they were planning.
Vegetables.
There were some vegetables, bitter gourd and others, but those, you have to tackle the issues. Nobody was saying you didn't, but not in the way that it was handled. And this is, I think, a tribute to how we worked as politicians we're aware of these issues more because we eat the same vegetables and we have the same mangoes.
Stay tuned and see you soon after the very short break.